Draft Mechanic is a proud member of Punchboard Media. Pull up a chair at punchboardmedia.com.
Draft Mechanic, episode 119.
On this episode of Draft Mechanic, we discuss recent plays of the Lions of Lydia, Felix the Cat in the Sack, and Zoned Out, and I use the word recent loosely. We have a 6-pack review of In the Hall of the Mountain King, which we're also putting on tap. We've got a hop primer for Mosaic hops, and in our final round, we asked our Slack channel what house rules they have. So sit back, relax, grab a pint, and enjoy the show.
You've seen the future and it works to take a mile. Know that all is for the best in the best of our
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Draft Mechanic. I'm Jake.
And I'm Danielle.
And Draft Mechanic is the podcast about board games and craft beer and anything we can do to tie the two together.
Here at Draft Mechanic, we like our beer like we like our board games.
At home. And wash your hands.
And at home.
Yes, I feel like that goes without saying right now.
No,
please.
nothing goes without saying right now.
Fair. Yeah, okay. So, hey, welcome so much back to... It's been a minute. Sorry, welcome back to this episode of Draft Mechanic. We really appreciate you tuning back in and giving us a little leeway over the last few weeks as we kind of adjusted to the new normal. If you are looking for us on the internet, you can find us at draftmechanic.net or at draftmechanic on your favorite social medias, as long as those medias are Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
We've also still got a Board Game Geek Guild, which is guild number 2470. There will be a thread up for this episode, as there is for every episode. And if we're talking about something and you have an opinion or you just want to tell us you don't like our opinion, that would be the place to do it.
Yeah, and we will at some point have a local game night again. Probably.
Theoretically.
That's the plan. But when we did, and I guess I want to just still say, the names of the places we do it at. So if you are coming through Charlotte, you can get some of their stuff through a drive-thru.
Well, I mean, you never say it. So,
True. So
we usually, in the normal world, have twice monthly meetups. One at Good Road Cider Works, that is in the first week of the month, and one at Salud Cerveceria on the third week of the month.
Yes.
I know at least Salud is doing curbside pickup for all their beer and food. So if you are in the Charlotte area, patronize them. They still have excellent beer and food.
And not just that, but they are also doing delivery inside the 485 area. So if you've
That is true. They did pick the most ridiculous delivery area.
I just want that big circle, I'm pretty sure is what he said.
Probably.
Which is fine, because that means that we can get Salud beer and food delivered to our house.
Yeah.
Good Road also, they are able to do growlers and stuff for curbside pickup.
Cool.
I talked to them a little while ago. We would have had their anniversary party last weekend, which would have been really cool, because we've been doing game night there since they opened up 3 or 4 years ago. One of those numbers. But
in the before times.
I assume that you are listening to this in the current day. If you are listening to this years and years later, this is the spring of 2020, April. Obviously, we are dealing with the coronavirus pandemic around the world, and we had to take some time off on some episodes there. I have been crazily overworked for the last 3 or 4 weeks. In addition to that, the ability to play board games when mostly you're trying to play with multiple people makes it very difficult to do when you are staying home. Because please stay home.
Please do stay home.
I know there's a lot of people out there that are on Tabletop Simulator, Tabletopia, some online services like that, and that's awesome. And I'm so glad that gaming has that outlet. I am not really on any of those things just because I can't sit in front of my very, very old computer that really just manages to record this podcast.
Don't say that while we're still using it to record the podcast.
And we did just spend 15 minutes trying to get the mixing board to work. So, everybody, thank you so much once again for tuning in, and hope that you're all having a good enough time out there, and that you are staying healthy and staying safe and staying occupied with board games and or craft beer wherever possible.
I will say one of the more lighthearted results of everybody having to stay home is that I did get an email from a coworker of mine this morning saying, "Hey, we're getting a little stir crazy here. What board games could we buy?" I was like,
Yes.
all
Two-player
it
board
took
games.
was a month of being stuck in your apartment before you have seen the light.
Well, I mean, 2-player board games are kind of good and stuff.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, if you go to buy most of them, 2-player board games are sold out everywhere. I tried to recommend
why.
Patchwork, and I was like, oh, nobody has Patchwork. The app is good if you guys are down with that.
Yeah. What else did you suggest?
Lost Cities, which is always a good 2-player one. I suggested Santorini, but put the little caveat that it is only good if you like chess.
True, very true.
I don't know what my coworker and his significant other are into as far as chess and board games and such. And I think I suggested Codenames Duet and said it was like a word guessing game. I also said Keyforge is an excellent game, but it is like a nerdy ass card game, and they don't really seem like nerdy ass card game people. But I was like, hey, it's a good thing if that's what you decided you wanted. If you become a completely different person.
Yes. At the beginning of the episode, I also did want to talk a little bit about the way that the beer industry is kind of dealing with stuff right now. Obviously, everybody's dealing with stuff in a bunch of different ways. I have a lot of friends in the beer industry, both on the server side and the brewing side. And I just wanted to kind of put, a few notes out there. If you are looking to support your local breweries, there are still plenty of ways to do it. A lot of them are doing takeout, they're doing drive-through pickups, or they're even doing delivery. Burial Beer, our eternal friends up in Asheville, are actually delivering to 37 states. Which I regret telling you now because 17 of you don't have states that can get delivery, and the other, no.
Do you think
13?
we have one listener in every state?
We have one listener, yes. I mean, it feels that way occasionally. But anyway, 37 states can get delivery from Burial, and I regret saying that because now you're going to go and get all the beer, and I will not be able to have it.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to pay a shipping charge, which is essentially like buying an extra bottle of beer when you're buying Burial stuff. I looked at their shipping charges, and I was like,
I mean, if you've never had it before and you wanted to try some of what we consider the best beer in the Carolinas,
now's the time
if
to do it,
yeah,
my
this
friends.
is a way to do it. And they're putting a lot of their limited edition bottles and stuff up there, here and there. But I also really encourage people out there, if you have the financial means to do so, please find ways to support your local service industry. Obviously, I work in food service. I have a lot of friends, again, in bar service, stuff like that. And a lot of these people live off of tips, and that's kind of what they need to get by. And even the ones that are furloughed and might be able to get some kind of unemployment are still hurting. There's two really cool resources that I have been keeping an eye on. There is avl.tips. It's a website that is straight up people can submit their Venmo or Cash App things on there, and you can tip people that have been, work in service industry. I've seen a bunch of the Burial people on there, for example.
That sounds like an Asheville website.
Yes, and there is also serviceindustry.tips,
cool,
which has sprung up afterwards and has different kind of sub pages for a bunch of different hubs. There is a Charlotte one, for example, that I've been looking at.
CLT.tips, I'm guessing?
I think if you go to serviceindustry.tips, it'll have the list of all the different markets that there are things in. I think it's like /Charlotte or something like that. But those things are out there, and if you do have the opportunity to order delivery, order some kind of drive-through, and tip these, your local service people that might not be able to make it through this financially, if you have the means to do so.
One of the things that was posted in our Slack by Danny Doherty as well is there is a website which is supportbeer.com.
Oh, yeah? Yeah.
And you can go there and look up by your state what breweries are doing pickup and what breweries are doing delivery. And if you're looking for a specific brewery, you can see, okay, maybe they're doing this. Also, Instagram is a great resource for this if you have an Instagram.
Yes.
Because every brewery that I follow is posting on their Instagram stories what they have available for crowlers, when their hours are, what their setup is. Like, they're making that information very well known because they need to.
Mm-hmm. I will say also, one thing that I'm seeing a lot more of now is a lot of breweries are putting into crowlers their special limited edition stuff that would have been taproom exclusives. So if you are out because you are an essential worker or because you are on a grocery run, which are the only legitimate reasons to go out of your house, okay, I guess medical care and also checking on families, okay, there's reasons. But if you happen to drive by a brewery and they are doing a drive-through, I encourage you to check it out. You might find some great stuff you never would have had a chance to find otherwise.
Because patronizing food establishments is also a reason that even under, I think, stay at home, if not
shelter in place, yeah,
you can leave the house.
Yeah, so keep an eye out for your local breweries. Keep an eye out for all of your local service industry. We really, really rely on your business, and right now it is going to be incredibly difficult for everybody in the entire world. But this is another spot that a lot of people are going to be having a lot of struggles that we might not think about right up front. So, shall we move on?
Yeah.
I think this is the part in the program where we usually do our Kickstarter updates. So, Danielle, will you lead us into the Kickstarter zone?
I most assuredly will, but since it's been kind kind of a minute since we did these. All of these Kickstarters have ended, so let's just go through them quickly. Garinto from Grand Gamers Guild funded at $87,838 of its $10,000 goal with 2,018 backers.
Nice.
Late pledges are still available on their Kickstarter website.
That's a really good fund.
Tumbletown from Weird Giraffe Games is funded at $66,512 of their $9,500 goal with 2,154 backers. Late pledges are also available on their Kickstarter page.
I'm seeing a pattern.
Graphic Novel Adventures Season 3 funded with $119,590 of their $30,000 goal with 1,422 backers. And Ludo Cherry Apparel funded with $158,316 Australian dollars of their $25,000 Australian dollar goal.
Ooh, Australian dollars.
Yeah, once it ends, it no longer converts to your local currency.
Fair.
They had 14,700 backers. Nope, they had 1,407 backers. I just added a bunch of zeros and moved things around.
It's okay. Congratulations for that second long success, Ludo Cherry, where you had a bunch of extra backers.
New business.
New business. We have a new project for a game from Bellwether Games. It is called Lions of Lydia. As of time of recording, it is funding at $38,000 of its $20,000 goal with 678 backers. This one ends on the 9th of April. That is short days away. This has an estimated delivery of October 2020, $39 for the base game, and you get the Kickstarter Wooden Fountain token. And you get $49 for the deluxe base game, which comes with the Kickstarter Wooden Fountain token, deluxe upgrade pack, and all the unlocked stretch goals. The stretch goals also come with the base, but I do want to point that out, that there are stretch goals. It is Kickstarter, and it is a game. But Danielle, about this game, we've actually had a chance to play it.
We have.
So perhaps we will do this in the Kickstarter preview after the bump?
We will.
Yeah.
Want to wear your draft mechanic pride to your local brewery, board game meetup, or board game meetup at a brewery? Check out redbubble.com/people/draft mechanic for t-shirts.
All right, so we have a Kickstarter preview in our recent plays, and it is Lions of Lydia. It's a 2020 release from Bellwether Games that plays 2 to 4 players in 30 to 60 minutes. This is designed by Johnny Pack Canton, with art by Daryl T. Jones. It is a game of bag management, tableau building, and throwing 4 men into a bag because that's how we do business.
Yeah, we just throw 4 men into a bag, duh.
Throwing your meeples into a bag, seeing which one comes out with the color you want.
So, Lions of Lydia is a game about when the idea of currency was developed. You are a merchant in a society that is trying to transition from pure bartering to using these lion-headed coins, these Lions of Lydia. And you are trying to balance how much business you're doing in goods bartering versus how much you're doing in money exchanges, because money is what you use to get property, because I guess it's the more governmental currency.
Yeah.
So you're going to set up the board, and the board it's a square, and it's got a market on each corner, one for each of the 4 colors, yellow, red, green, and blue. In the middle, it's got a fountain, and around each side of the board, you are going to put a set of cards. Some of those cards will allow you to get goods when you place a specific merchant at a specific gate. Some of them will allow you to get money when you place a specific merchant at a specific gate. And some of them will be end game points. Throughout the game, you're going to be acquiring these cards into your tableau and upgrading them to make them stronger and to gain points at the end of the game. So what you're going to be doing on your turn is you're actually going to take one of the merchants out of your bag. You're going to start with 4 merchants, one of each color in your bag, and you are going to pull one of them out of the bag.
Ooh.
It will be one of the colors that I mentioned before. You then have an option. You can either put him at one of the gates to be able to do some trading, or you can put him in the center where you're going to be able to acquire some property. If you put him at one of the gates, you are going to get resources equal to the color of the merchant and the color of the gate and the color of all the other merchants who are already at that gate, because they're there and you can trade with them.
Yeah.
If the merchant that you place on a later turn happens to be a gold Lydian merchant, you may also at that point exchange some of the goods that you have on your goods tracker card. This has a player card where you just move the meeple up, sort of like a lot of Stonemaier games have, where you don't actually take a token for every resource, you just move your little person up. Mm-hmm. So if you place a Lydian merchant, you can exchange goods for the same number of coins, or if you place any other merchant, you do not have that option on that turn. Then you're going to take any merchants which now have any matching merchant. So if I placed a green merchant at a gate that already had a green merchant, those merchants will be moved to the center fountain area. At that point, at the end of your turn, you're going to take one of the merchants from the fountain area, including if it got moved there, the one you just put at that gate, and put it back into your bag. So you're going to end your turn with 4 merchants back in your bag. If the merchant that you drew out of the bag you instead choose to place in the center fountain area, making it again immediately available for drawing at the end of the round, you are able to buy property. And property has a cost in goods, but also in coins a lot of the time. You can buy property from any one side of the board. So when you set those cards up at the beginning, you had to sort of pay attention to what was grouped together, because when you buy property, you can buy as many cards as you want from one single side of the board. You can also develop property, which is paying its cost in resources and coins again to flip it over and make it more powerful. If it gives you a resource, it will likely give you 2 resources after you develop it. If it gives you coins, it may give you an extra coin. If it gives you points, it'll give you more points, and it'll be worth more at the end of the game. You're then going to take one of the merchants from the middle and put it back into your bag, because you need 4 merchants at the beginning of every turn.
Gotta have them merchants. Gotta do business.
Yes. This is going to continue going until one person has upgraded whatever the number of cards that is relevant to your particular player count. So in a 2-player game, it's 8 cards. In a 4-player game, it's 6 cards. Until one person has upgraded that to their more powerful side. At which point you are going to count up points. Now, the points that you get may come from the cards that you've acquired. You may get points for having increased the number of cards you could have in your tableau, because you can only have a certain number at the beginning, and then that number increases as you increase your influence, which essentially means you max out one of your resource tracks at least once. The resource tracks only go up to 6, so you can only ever have 6 of a certain resource. If you would gain more than that, you just lose what you would gain more than that. So that is a balancing act in and of itself. But when a resource reaches that end column, you get an option to either increase the number of cards you have in your tableau, which also gives you a monetary benefit, and if you do it enough times, points at the end of the game, or to be able to upgrade one of your cards for free without paying the cost, which is a nice way. If you're hard up for a particular resource, if you've stacked your bag badly, you could maybe flip over a card that you just needed, one of a green resource, and you didn't have a way to get that at the moment. So you're going to add up those points from the cards that you have and from your influence track at the bottom. If you were the first person to get the required number of upgraded cards, you will also have taken the fountain token from the middle of the board, which is, I believe, upgraded in the Kickstarter to a wooden fountain token. Mm-hmm. And that person is going to get the sum of their remaining coins as well. So it may benefit you at the end of the game to rush the end so that you get a bunch of points for your coins if you've got leftover coins because you made a good trade with a Lydian merchant. Whoever has the most points at the end is the best Lion of Lydia, I assume.
The most lionable. Most lional?
I feel like there's a Tiger King joke here, but I
haven't
don't
seen
know
Tiger
because neither
King.
of us have seen Tiger King.
We watched Star Trek instead.
Maybe you're the Lion King? No, that's something different and Disney owns it.
We would get sued. So Lions of Lydia has a lot of interesting kind of like rollover tracks that I find really interesting. So like you said, the resources, when you max out the resource, you can roll over and kind of bump up the bottom track of your influence. And I really like the way that those kind of systems interlock. That's probably my most exciting thing about this game, is just kind of that decision of, do I spend these resources right now? Do I hold on to them so I can use this to bump up the other track underneath here? Or do I really need to spend resources to upgrade this particular card, flip it over so it's more valuable for my next turn? There's a lot of really interesting small decisions that you're making on every turn about how you want to most efficiently use your resources and kind of plan your engine building. And I'm really, really excited about the way that all those pieces work together.
Yeah. One of the other really neat things that is another one of these systems that works together that I didn't really talk about in the overview is that the way you get Lydian merchants, because like I said, you start with one of each of the 4 colors. Mm-hmm. The Lydian merchants get added when you buy some of the cards which are placed around the outside. They get kicked off the cards when you buy them into the fountain area. So as your game is developing a little more, you get these Lydian merchants, and you have to make the decision, do you want to take the merchants of one of the 4 colors? Because that allows you to continue to get more resources. It allows the cycle of pairs of merchants being kicked back into the center to be much stronger. So if you're going for a particular color, you want to be placing yellow so that yellow can be brought to the middle so you can be drawing yellow. That type of system works really well. But if you have a lot of resources already, you want to make sure that you're converting them into coins, because you are wasting them if you're getting more, and you're going to need coins to buy some of the stronger endgame cards and to upgrade those. And when do I want to take the Lydian merchant? That's not going to give me an additional resource when I place him on a gate because he doesn't have a color, but is going to allow me to convert some of the existing resources into really valuable neutral coins.
Yeah.
And when do I just want to take the one that matches the color that really runs my engine really well?
Yeah. I think what it kind of the way that I kind of think about the game is the game feels very fluid and liquid. It feels like stuff is constantly converting in smooth ways. And I think that's enhanced even more by the way that it treats workers. This is something that I feel like I'm seeing more frequently in games these days, where your workers aren't your workers. They're just workers that kind of go into the center of the board and then they come back in. Somebody else, like Coldwater Crown does it with the kind of the casting tokens. Raiders of the North Sea does it as well with kind of the exact kind of thing where you're putting down a worker and taking another one back from a section. And I really enjoy that because it makes you less like frugal about your workers in a way. At least it makes me feel that way. Like, you know, I don't sit there thinking like, oh, well, I got to make sure that I have all the red workers because they do this particular thing in my engine this way. It's like, no, you have to use them. If you want to use them at all, you have to let them go for a little while and then you can hopefully get something back. It feels very fluid and liquid. And that's something that I really am interested in seeing in worker placement games.
See, it's interesting to me that that's the game that your brain automatically compared it to, because the thing that my brain automatically compared it to was the Bloody Inn.
Okay.
Because of the currency conversion or the resource conversion.
Yeah.
In the Bloody Inn, you can gain money, but once you get to a point, you need to spend a turn converting your money into banknotes because you can't have a bunch of cash on hand when you're doing murders in your hotel. It draws entirely too much attention. So you need to spend a turn converting your money in order to be able to continue running what you've got going. And that always felt like a really frustrating turn because you're like, okay, I need to now spend this turn and all I'm really doing is money changing. I'm money laundering essentially. So that didn't feel fun. Whereas in Lions of Lydia, you have to convert your resources to coins, but it's not your whole turn because you still get to place a Lydian merchant in order to do that. So you're still gaining some resources, but it also it's linked into a really beneficial system where, like, if you can get your resources all the way up to the top, then you've got influence bumps or card flips from it, but then you can't gain any more of those resources. If you can place a Lydian merchant, not only are you going to be able to convert them, but you're now giving yourself the ability to bump that merchant back up to the top, increase your influence again. And you can get like 18 points if you max out your influence tracks.
Oh, yeah.
It's not an insignificant amount. Or you can flip over one of those cards, which may be, 3 or 4 coins. It may be a bunch of resources and a coin. It is a really valuable thing to take that action that allows you to convert. Whereas in Bloody Inn, it felt a little bit more restrictive and punishing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Being able to convert into that fun resource makes it a lot more fun. Who would have thought? The other thing I think is exciting to me, I was surprised how well the engine building part of it ramped up. Like at the beginning of the game, I really kind of felt like, oh, it's going to take me a whole bunch of turns to be able to afford those cards. And then it was like 3-4 turns later, my engine had just kind of logarithmically exploded where I'm flipping over and getting like 17 resources or some ridiculous number of stuff. And then next turn I go in and I buy 4 property cards all at the same time. It was a really interesting kind of escalation of the engine that made it like feel like the game was going very quickly, even though it's not like it was, too short of a game. I feel like it was the right amount of time for that escalation to go on. And then we got to the end of a game and you're kind of making that decision. Do I end the game now? Do I flip over this last card just to get, the end of the game to get that bonus token? And it's a really fun kind of decision about when am I done playing with my toy and I'm ready to end this thing?
Yeah. And it was a really interesting. I remember there was one game that we played where you had bought a bunch of cards, and the cards that are set out at the beginning of the game are all the cards that are going to be out for that entire game. You don't ever refill them. So you can look and see, okay, what's valuable, what's not valuable at this point, what's grouped together really nicely to be able to be bought together. And at the end of a game, I had, I think, 6 cards flipped over, and you had just bought stuff. So you were down on resources. And I was like, okay, do I end the game this turn? Or do I give myself another turn? Because I essentially had the option. I could have flipped those cards, and I had a Lydian merchant. I could have done that at that moment.
Yeah.
And I was like, no. If Jake gets another turn, all he's going to get are extra resources, because that's the thing he has to go for now. And resources aren't worth anything at the end of the game. I can take this turn, let him have another turn, then end it on my next turn. You had started the game, so you wouldn't have gotten another turn anyway. And then I got the fountain token and the end of the cards, and I got to convert my money, which you had a bunch of money, but you couldn't do anything with it.
Yeah, it was a very good play. And it's smart because you really have to be aware of the other player's ability to end the game, because it's a lot closer than it seems.
Yeah.
And you can find yourself just caught with a big old pile of resources.
Yeah.
It's like, oh no.
It is definitely a game that to steal from the Dukes of Dice makes you feel clever when you feel clever.
Yeah.
How did you like having so few workers? Because you only ever have 4 workers in your bag in this game.
I actually was totally fine with it because I pulled one out of the bag. So I always only had 1 worker.
Yeah.
In my mind, really, it didn't matter how many were in the bag. I only ever had 1 worker, and then I got to decide what I was going to do with that. It's that input versus output randomness. So I had a random input given to me that I had to decide what to do with, rather than a random output when I placed the worker of what I got back from it.
But you didn't really have a random input because you were in control of what was in your bag at any time.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, no, I mean, there's a balance there. There's mitigation, and like even some of the end game cards will kind of gear you towards like, oh, you want to have pairs of colors in your bag at the end of the game. So I had that, in one particular game, I'm working to get like a pair of red and a pair of yellow, and I thought that was a really smart thing there. But like, I was never down on how few workers I had, because I really always felt like I just had 1 worker, and I had to make the best with whatever I drew.
Okay, cool.
You can set yourself up, as well as you want, but who knows what'll come up. Maybe it's a green guy again, and you have no green cards, and you're wondering why you took the green.
Why
meeple.
did you take the green?
There were choices made.
Well, I mean, sometimes you do have to take a meeple you did not want to take because it's all that's in the center.
Yeah. You just go to the fountain and you're just like, whatever, you in the green coat, get in the bag.
This
is not a great metaphor. We're going to move on. But yeah, Lions of Lydia, it is on Kickstarter for a few more days.
I do have one thing left to say because I'm adamant about it, and it's still in Kickstarter, so this may be a thing that happens to this game, but it desperately needs a reference card.
Okay.
Absolutely desperately. There are 2 sets of actions. There is what you do on your turn and what you do if you go to a gate versus a fountain. By the end of the game, I was sort of comfortable with what I was doing. But at the beginning of that game, I desperately wanted a card that told me, on my turn, I do the 4 steps that are listed in the rulebook. And once I have picked where I'm going, I do the steps that are listed in the rulebook on a different page. And I just kept flipping back and forth and back and forth.
Maybe
desperately needs a rulebook.
Or a back
Or not a
page,
rulebook, a reference card.
Would you deal with back page of the rulebook?
That'd be fine.
Okay.
All those things listed in one place is what it needs. Other than that, like everything we had is prototype components. So I'm not even saying it doesn't have that. If you buy this game in a year, maybe it has a reference card. In which case, good job, Bellwether.
Yay.
But that is the one thing I came away from the game going, oh, dang. I expected not to like this game because it looked not like what I wanted to do. But then we started playing it, and we definitely played it 2 times right in a row.
Oh, yeah. It's those fun little
tiny
decisions.
It was super fun.
Yeah.
So, like, the front of it just looks like, oh, it's a woman standing in front of a square.
Commerce.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she's not even doing commerce. She's just standing there. But once we started playing it, it was really fun. And it was a lot more than I anticipated just based on what I didn't know about it, which is, a lesson for always.
And that is why we are here, to tell you about board games. Yes, board games. Now you've heard about Lions of Lydia, and you have several days to back it on Kickstarter.
Several's a stretch.
Some days. What day is today?
The 6th.
The 6th. You have till the 9th. You have days. Some of them. Go to there.
All right, let's move on.
Danielle, tell me about the game that I'm going to describe.
Well, you're going to describe Zoned Out, which is a 2020 release from Grey Fox Games, which plays 2 to 4 players in 30 to 45 minutes, designed by Keith Rentz with art by Jake Blanchard. This is a game of card placement, city building,
quote unquote,
and making sure the museum next door isn't replaced with an abandoned lot. They have paved paradise and put up a parking lot. Ooh, sha-la-la-la.
I put that in there when you weren't looking. Did you like it?
It's lovely.
Yes, the game of Zoned Out is very bright and very colorful and very squares because you have square cards and square building pieces, and you're going to be making square cities. I guess not actually square cities. You're going to be making a collection of squares next to each other cities using these square cards. Yeah. Let me start over.
Cities with right angle boundaries.
How do you feel about squares? I hope you like them because that's what you're going to get in Zoned Out. Each of the cards in Zoned Out depicts 4 city blocks. Basically, it's a square card that's divided into 4 squares. Each square is a city block, and they're zoned residential, commercial, and industrial. Each of them has a different color. It's backwards from SimCity, which drives me crazy. Red is residential. The blue is industrial, and yellow is commercial. Those two are backwards, and it drives me crazy. I've played a lot of SimCity.
In SimCity.
Yeah, what is commercial? It's green, right?
It's green is residential. Red, I think, is like emergency services.
Oh, now I know. But regardless, you'll have different zones on different squares of your card. They'll be either of light, medium, or heavy density. They'll have 1, 2, or 3 buildings, which is kind of how you understand that. There are also some other kinds of things you will find on city blocks, like parks or museums, which are good. Or you will have parking lots and abandoned derelict houses, which are bad. You don't want them. Each of the, well, you don't want the bad parts. You want the good parts. Each of the different types of zones, commercial, industrial, and residential, also have a wild, that is an undetermined density, will be determined by the blocks around it. And now I will explain to you how you're going to build this city. On your turn, you're going to be playing one of your cards into the ever-growing metropolis that you're building and Zoned Out. It's going to start in the center with 4 cards that are butted up next to each other. You're going to put all the parking lots together. You're going to slap down a downtown card on top of it, which is a special card that is really just there to tell you where the center that you started from is.
So oddly enough, you start with a city with no parking lots downtown.
Yeah, somebody's better pave it and put up a parking lot. Anyway, on your turn, you're going to play one of your cards, and kind of in a Honshu-style fashion, you're going to place that card on top of other cards. You have to cover at least 1 city block, but you may not cover 4. So you have to, cover 1, 2, or 3 city blocks with the card you place down. And you're going to, quote unquote, rezone it to whatever it is, because I guess that's how you rezone things. You just place new zones on top of them.
Sure.
Yes. And when you do that, you're going to then take your player pawn, your, I guess...
he's like a foreman. He's got a little construction hard hat.
A little hat on. He's your zonesman. Zoner person, and you're going to place it somewhere on that new card, one of the 4 different city blocks. Once you've done that, you are said to be developing that zone. Say I place a card down and I put my person in the 2 density commercial, I'm developing a medium density commercial zone. And then on subsequent turns, it is in my best interest to try to expand out that commercial zone by playing additional medium density commercial zones next to it.
Maybe.
I'll obviously have to overlap some cards and make that happen. But the benefit there is after you've grown a zone big enough because either you're satisfied with what you've done and you want to move somewhere else in the map, or because you've run out of cards that are medium density, which is the only thing you can add on to it. Next time you play a card and you move your guy onto it and it's no longer that medium density, chunk you're in, you're going to develop the zone you left. Developing is pretty simple. You take these nice little plastic pieces that look like building floors and you're going to place a number of them onto whatever city blocks in the zone you left. So, for example, if I had an L shape of 4 city blocks that were medium density commercial, I'm going to place 2 on each of them, kind of just showing 2 floors because it's a medium density. So I've built out all that, and then I'm also going to place one of my floors in one of the quadrants of the downtown card that I mentioned long ago in this discussion. That's basically going to say, I built a building or a zone in this quadrant. It'll matter at the end of the game. You'll get some points. You'll feel good about it if your floors are in the center. After you zone out a zone, you're going to score points for it on a pyramidal kind of scale, 1, 3, 6, 10, 15, etc., depending on the number of city blocks were in your zone. You're going to move on with your city planner. City planner, that's what he's called. That's what the little meeple person thingy is. Anyway,
I didn't read the rule book.
That's where they are. And then they're on the new zone. You're going to start it again, and so on and so forth. However, I want to go back to that scoring one more time, because I mentioned a while ago about parks, museums, parking lots, and bad buildings. derelict buildings. You're going to also get positive and negative points onto your zone score depending on any adjacent and contiguous ones of those specialty buildings. So, for example, if I had a park on one side and a museum on another, I would get +1 and +2 points for a total of +3 points. This also applies if you have like a big long line of parks that are going off the end of one of your zones. So it is contiguous. It doesn't just have to be adjacent to your zone. You're going to get -1 or -2 points for any of the bad zones that are contiguous and adjacent to your zone as well, and then you'll feel sad about that. There's also some public scoring cards and some secret objective scoring cards that will come into play, and they'll be random throughout the game. That'll be, develop a bunch of medium density this, or develop a whole bunch of tiny things like this, or you get $3 whenever you do a really small thing. And then everybody's also got their one secret objective, which is something that they're going to be going for. The catch there is, at the end of the game, everybody is going to score every one of those secret objectives. So you kind of gotta want to watch what other players are doing, because if they're doing something that's really obvious, you might want to try to get in on that to get some of them points as well. You might do that. You might try to get the points.
You might try to get the points, but you might be wrong and guess what they were doing incorrectly.
The game's going to go on until one player runs out of pieces, or you run out of cards that are able to be drawn out of the card stack. You count up a whole bunch of points, you look at them, and you're just like, yep, I'm zoned out. That wasn't even a joke. That's just the name of the game.
It is.
Yeah. Danielle, how do you feel about Zoned Outed?
I like Zoned Outed. Or Zoned Out, because I'm going to say the name of the game properly. I'm also going to say that we received this game as a review copy from Gray Fox Games.
Yes.
Who is a sponsor of this podcast. So
these are important things to note.
It is important that you know that. I liked it quite a bit. I like city planning games. I liked the fact that you weren't always encouraged to make the biggest zone possible. Because the first time I played this, I was like, oh, I want to make a zone of the card that I have the very most of. Because you start with some cards in your hand and you're like, oh, okay, I've got a couple of maybe medium density industrial. Maybe that's where I want to start. But that's not really the way to win this game. The way to win this game is to play to the objectives. And if you start with something that's saying, okay, develop a whole bunch of industrial zones, it doesn't really matter if you have one city block or you have 2 or 3 or 4. You're scoring those points at the end, which I think all the secret objective cards are either 1 point per or 6 points if you meet an objective. All the ones we saw.
I think there was one that you get like 2 coins if you are in the top 2 floors of the. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not. They're points,
but they're not insubstantial amounts of points. Is sort of my point. Whereas you have to make a 3-size building with no detriments to make the same number of points, which is or a 3-size zone with no detriments to make the same number of points. So by going for those objectives, you can really make a lot of points without having to have all your cards to make huge zones, which is good, because otherwise, if you drew a bunch of cards that weren't what you were going for, it could get really frustrating. Now, there is a mechanic that allows you to essentially bin your entire hand at the beginning of your turn, so that the new cards that you get are able to be used on that turn, which I did like as well. Usually you have to get rid of your cards at the end of the previous turn.
Yeah.
But here, you can see what has happened before your turn, before you decide whether or not you can do anything with your cards.
Yeah.
But doing that gets you negative points at the end of the game, and those are also pyramidal. So you get 1 negative point for the first one, but you get 3 if you've taken 2, and 6, and so on and so forth. This is going to be very bad if you do this a lot.
Before you move on from that, I thought that was an awesome way to do that mechanic. This is one of the things that I used occasionally, and I feel like it is negative scored just right enough to encourage you to use it 1, 2, or 3 times. Like, I never felt like I never felt like I had to use it, but there were a lot of times where I'm just like, 1 point is not that bad, or 2 more points is okay. But then you get to a point where you're like, no, I've used this enough. I really, really love the way that mitigation is scored in that pyramidal kind of sense. It's really smart.
Yeah, and it made you think about the fact that if you use this now, it's fine. But if you use it now and then you need to use it again later, that could be not as fine. So do I really need to use this now, even though it's just 1 point? But what if I get terrible cards down the road? Then I'm not going to want to use it again, and I may try to make something that absolutely doesn't work, and that can be that can put you back a couple of turns.
Yeah. It's just 1 point. Don't worry about it.
I also like the way that the parks and negative properties worked in this game, because they are contiguous from where you are scoring. It's possible to make something that other players need to break up. And you did this in our first game of this. You had a big, long string of parks. And I was over in my side of the board working on the thing that I was working on, getting my floors in the center in that quadrant and the adjacent quadrant. And on the opposite corner, you were just putting parks down next to stuff.
Just parking.
Just parks everywhere.
Just, making my greens.
So when you scored that, you didn't only get the one park that was touching, you got everything that was connected, and you could continue connecting zones adjacent to that and keep scoring that big chunk of parks.
Yes.
So it got to the point where I had to abandon what I was doing and go over there and be like, okay, this is enough. Mm-hmm. And there are interesting rules about when you can cover zones that other people have been working on. So you essentially can't cover a zone that somebody has placed their house floors in, obviously. Once they're there, the card won't fit. Mm-hmm. Can't put that there. But you also can't cover over the zone that somebody is developing. So once you get into a zone, I can't block you off at that point.
Yeah.
So I need to make sure that I get over there at a time when I can break up this little park monopoly you got going on and break it up and put like an abandoned building right in the middle of it that breaks it apart and gives you -2 points.
Such a great city planner. Oh, nice park. I'm going to put this derelict building in the middle of it.
And
usually the derelict building has been there.
We're competing city planners. So I thought that was interesting. Mm-hmm. I always loved that overlay mechanic. You had a really good sort of description of the way this game is. And I'm sure you were probably saving it for your final thoughts, but it would be very helpful to people listening to know what it is.
I'm going to do it right now. You ready?
Do it.
So when I read the rule book, I turned to you and I'm like, oh, this is Carcassonne plus Honshu plus Expansity. And it is really a combination of a lot of the best things of all those. Obviously, Expansity, because you've got square tiles, you're building up floors, you're going for building objectives. Carcassonne for the way that you're moving your city planner around from zone to zone and also kind of managing your zones and trying to, break up other people's zones. And then Honshu with that card overlay mechanic is just like a perfect, obviously. I was really, really surprised how much I enjoyed the gameplay of this.
Not to say you don't like those other games.
No, obviously I love all those other games, and I think that's what is so interesting about this. I expected, it's just going to be watered down blank. But it really took all the pieces that I wanted out of a lot of those games, and obviously it doesn't have everything of Carcassonne, because Carcassonne is a tile laying game, blah, 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 blah. We've talked about it ad nauseum at this point. But it has a lot of really cool kind of mechanics and kind of joining bits in there.
How did you feel about the fact that I believe every card has some kind of negative territory on it? Some have 2.
Yeah.
But I think every card has at least 1 negative on it.
And this actually ties into one thing that I did want to say. As I got to playing the game more, if I was looking for a specific kind of card, I noticed a lot of my cards were laid out in the same orientation. Like if I was working on a 2 commercial, just because that's what I'm always talking about. And I laid the cards next to each other so the 2 commercial was in the top left. It seemed like every single card was laid out in the same orientation, with a parking lot in the top right, and I had a park in the bottom left, so on and so forth. And
but the 4th zone wasn't always the same thing.
No, it was always, it's something else. But it was kind of interesting to me to see that, and that might have just been a game balance issue, honestly. Maybe they needed to balance it out, but I was surprised to see that kind of similarity of a lot of the cards.
Well, I always took it to mean, because that meant if you were trying to expand your zone, you always had to be adjacent to one of the negatives.
Yeah.
Because if they had put them all on one side, there would have been a zone that was adjacent to the good and a zone that was adjacent to the bad. Mm-hmm. Whereas this way you were always between the positive and the negative, if there were a positive and the negative on the card. So you couldn't just ignore the negatives. You had to find a way to overlay them before you scored if you didn't want to get those negative points.
And I'm sure there's some kind of algorithm that planned out a lot of these cards. And by algorithm I mean Josh, that planned out all these cards. And cool. I mean, I'm sure it makes sense. And it didn't really impact the gameplay. It just kind of made me look at them like, oh, this is a little weird that these cards line up exactly the same like this.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't know. That was me.
I didn't think of it sort of oddly in any way. Made sense to me.
Yeah. Another thing I will say that is frustrating at this specific time is I feel this game will play way better with 4 than it does with 2.
Yeah, I mean,
we
we played it with 4.
Yeah. We'll say this is obviously quarantine at home kind of play. We played some 2-player games. We played some virtual 4-player games where we were picking up and putting down hands of cards for 2 different players. But the interaction at that 4 players was really, really cool. And it was really something that wasn't present when we played with 2. And that might have just been because we don't play aggressively as 2 players, and the game kind of needs close quarters and a little bit of aggressive play as you're kind of cutting each other's zones off here and there. But with 2 players, we very much found, okay, I'm going to do this entire quadrant, you're going to do this entire quadrant.
Yeah. I mean, I do definitely remember stating at one point in our 2-player game, well, if you're going to be a little bitch about it, I'm going to do this. That was not a non-interactive moment in that particular game.
Yeah.
But
at 4 players, it's a lot more crowded. You have to kind of understand where other players are playing because, again, the way the zones are going to build out, if you are trying to work on a large zone, is going to be really impacted by the placement of other cards. And I thought that was a really interesting crowding that I didn't expect from the way I played it, too.
Mm-hmm. I do want to say, though, like just looking at the involvement that the game had, I feel like this gave me a little bit more than what I got out of Honshu. This felt like a little bit meatier of a game, which might just be because we didn't get amazing at Honshu. Maybe Honshu has all of that depth if you play it 100 times. But like, I felt like this was a really nice level of game where you could very easily explain it to somebody who wasn't a hobby gamer all the time, but was of a mindset that picks up rules quickly. I mean, like, maybe your 5-year-old is not going to pick this up very, very quickly. But if you've got, a sibling or a parent or an older child who plays games, they're going to get this pretty quickly. It makes a bunch of sense. It's just, it's not super meaty, obviously. It's a light, medium weight game. But it felt like it had enough for me.
Cool. Can we talk about the art?
Yeah, we can.
We
can argue about the art.
Danielle,
yes.
are you ready to have a disagreement?
Yes.
I think this game is unpleasant to look at.
Okay, I think you're wrong.
Well, yeah, you do think I'm wrong. But let me explain.
I'm not going to say, like, I think you don't think it's unpleasant to look at. You do.
No, but here's my explanation. The game is a very, very saturated color palette.
Agreed.
And it is very busy. It is
Also
very
agreed.
close quarters. It's kind of like if you took one of those, when you were a kid, you had the playmat on the floor of the city, and you had like roads, and you're driving a little car. You know what I'm talking about? Like the big roll-up playmat?
The one that's in every dentist's office ever.
Yeah, exactly. That one, except compressed onto tiny cards. And the color saturation was really unpleasant for me to look at. I had a hard time kind of parsing what was going on a lot of the cards. It's kind of like it's very reminiscent of the Onirim series of games, the art that is in those games, except instead of watercolors, it's really big permanent Crayola markers. I understand why you like it, and I feel like...
You haven't even let me say that I like it.
Yeah, okay.
Why I like it.
She likes it. But it just really, it's hard for me to look at. It's really hard for me to look at.
And I will not disagree with you that the fact that it is hard for 50% of the people who played it in this house to look at is perhaps a problem.
Yeah, I'm really interested to know if this is something that other people will talk about with this game, or if it is just me being me, doing a weird thing.
Perhaps. I happen to very much like it. I enjoy the color saturation. It reminds me, and the first time I saw this, I don't know why this clicked in my brain, but if you watch like the 90s episodes of The Simpsons, or the very, very early 90s episodes of The Simpsons, it looks to me like that. Everything's kind of a little bit squiggly on the straight lines, and it's very color saturated. And I remember it like making the CRT TV, not CRT.
Yeah, that's it.
The CRT TV, like the little, like you got real close to it and you could see those poor little cells straining to make this TV program look remotely normal.
Okay.
And that also has very few flesh tones in it because people are yellow in The Simpsons land.
True. So the game looks good if you get real close up to your TV?
No. What I'm saying is like it looks... Yeah, if you get close to your TV away from the game.
You'll burn your eyes out.
No, it looks like that style of art. And I don't know, I just happen to like that style of sort of not sketchy, but imperfect hand-drawn looking art. The saturation didn't bother me. And I think that the fact that you couldn't really make out what was going on because it was so busy, it became a background that I could see the buildings on top of better.
Okay.
Because the buildings are also, they're equally strongly saturated with these vibrant colors. And we're not talking about like very light colors. These are neon pinks and neon yellows.
Is Crayola marker bright.
Because they were so busy and so packed together in the background, I could see the buildings better than if they had been sort of more spaced out of the same vibrancy.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just me. But I don't know. It is certainly polarizing art. I liked it, but I understand that if it is difficult for you to look at, that's not great.
And I don't know why. It's like, it's a weird thing because I usually don't have this kind of reaction with like super colorful or super anything kind of like, I love really colorful movies and stuff, but this particularly...
But you don't watch, like the movies are not that condensed.
True, I don't watch them with my face up on the TV like some people in this room. But all those things said, it looks awesome on the table as you're building it out because you have all those plastic buildings, and the game's pretty dang fun to play, and I'm really excited to play with 4 players whenever we get the ability to play with 4 players.
Okay, we don't get to rave forever.
No.
There is one elephant in the room of this game.
What's the elephant? Because mine was the colors.
Oh, no, mine is the rulebook.
Ah.
The rulebook is missing some very important pieces of information. For instance, what happens at the end of the game if you don't have exactly the same number of pieces as you need to place? The game ends when somebody runs out of pieces, but when you close out a zone, you place a piece in the center and a certain number of pieces on every square in your zone. Do you have to end perfectly? Rulebook doesn't tell you. BGG tells you.
Yep.
But if you don't know to go there, if you're one of the people who just bought a ton of board games because they can't leave their house ever, maybe you don't know to go to BGG and look at that up. And there were a couple of... That was the one that struck me the most because it's the end game. Like, you need to know about that.
Yeah.
But there were a couple of rules. Like, we were going through and going, well, what happens if this? I don't know. What does happen if this?
Nobody knows in the city.
The rulebook is very easy to read. You read it very quickly. It is excellently large font, but it could use a little bit more detail, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, go on BGG for those items if you would like, because they have been answered.
Good.
Yeah. But yeah, Zoned Out is available now from Grey Fox Games. Danielle, we're 52 minutes in, and you have one game to talk about before we get to our main section. It is Felix the Cat in the Sack, the 2007 Rio Grande Games published game, also republished as Felicity the Cat in the Sack, 2017 from Stronghold Games, plays 3 to 7 players in 20 of your minutes.
Plays 3 to 5 players.
Damn. Plays 3 to 5 players in about 20 of your human Earth minutes. Designed by Friedman Fries, you can tell because the game started with F, and art by Lars Arne Mora Kaloski. This is a game of bidding, bluffing, and weird interspecies dynamics. Danielle, tell us about the cat in the sack.
Okay, this is a bidding game. And everybody is going to start out with some cards that have various animals on them. They have good cats, which are worth positive points. They have neutral bunnies, which are worth no points. They have bad cats, which are worth negative points. And
what are bad cats?
You've seen...
I've seen bad cats.
Yeah, there are some wonky bad cats. And there are dogs which chase away other animals because dogs are... And other dogs. So
dogs chase dogs?
Dogs chase dogs.
Dogs bite
and
man.
cats and bunnies. So in this game, what you're going to do is everybody's going to start with the same set of cards. The player next to them is going to randomly remove one card from each person's, stack. So you're going to start with not exactly the same set of cards. You'll have 9 cards. Everybody is going to have started with the same set, but be missing one of them. There are going to be some cards which are going to mark your trade row. One is a cat in a sack. The other ones are mice money token cards because your money in this game is called mice.
Sure.
They are little tiddlywinks.
Mice.
They are in no way mice.
Mice.
Anyway, there is one that says 2, one that says 4, then one that says 6, and I think maybe one that says 8 for a 5-player game.
Ooh.
Everybody is going to, on their turn, pick a card from their hand to play face down. You're going to start with the first player for each round. They will pick a card, place it under the cat in the sack, and then you're going to continue under the cards which have been placed out as your mice money row. Each of the cards that has a mice money value will also get that number of mice tokens on it. So you're going to lay out all these cards. At the beginning of the round, the first player will flip over their card, which will have been the first one in the row, and they will either start bidding or pass. So now you know there is, at least in the sack, one bad cat. If that's what I put down. And maybe I'll pass if I did that. Or maybe I'll flip it over and show that I put my bunny in. So we don't really know anything about this sack except that it only has 4 important cards. And I'll bid 1. Whatever. You either start the bidding or pass. Then it will go to the next player. They can continue to either up the bid or to pass. Whenever a player passes, they are going to take the mice tokens from the lowest value mice card, not including the cat in the sack. So the first player to pass gets 2 mice.
Ooh.
And they get their money back. You don't pay what you bid if you don't win. You also then flip over the next card in the row. So when one person passes, everybody else gets more information about what is in this stupid sack.
What's going on in this sack?
There is no sack in the game, by the way. It's just a card row.
Oh.
But, I guess the first player token is a sack. But so you get another piece of information about the card. As another person passes, they're going to take the next set of mice tokens, more mice tokens, because they've stayed in this auction longer. They've shown more brass about them. And then you'll flip another card. When the next to last person passes, they'll take the highest amount of cards. You will flip over the final card, and that person who is left, the one person who hasn't passed, will pay the money that they've bid and take all the cards, with some exceptions.
Ooh.
If there were any dogs in the row,
Woof.
they will chase away some of the other animals.
Woof, woof.
If there is a large dog, it will chase away the highest value card.
Woof.
If there is a small dog, it will chase away the lowest value card. Probably a bad cat.
You excited for this noise?
Yes. If there are 2 dogs, they will chase away all of the dogs. Like 2 or more dogs, they will chase away all of the dogs.
That's confusing.
Yeah, you want to have 1 dog in a row if you are using a dog.
Okay.
So if there are more than 1 dog, all the dogs run away and everything else gets left alone. Whoever wins the auction gets the cards that are left after the dogs chase everything away, be they good or bad. And they will become the first player for the next round. The game is going to go 9 rounds. At the end of the game, you will add up all of the points from the cards that you have in your hand. So good cats, bad cats, and bunnies. And you will add to that however many mice you have left in your pot.
Mouse noise.
That will be your score. Whoever has the highest score is the winner. This is a fine auction game. I normally don't like auction games. You didn't play this game with me, so you won't have a lot to say about it, I don't think.
Just animal noises.
Yeah, it's fine. It's a better auction game than many, but not the best auction game that I can possibly think of.
Yeah.
It is fairly simple. I won the game that we played, a 5-player game, by getting no sacks of animals. I did not win any cards.
How did you win?
I just kept passing late in the round and keeping all of my money and getting a lot of mice tokens from passing.
How frugal.
Yeah, it turned out nice, but I didn't get any large negative points either. So it's a fine game, and that's a way to play it.
So what we've learned is the best way to win the cats is to not buy any more cats or something.
Perhaps. Maybe you'll get a bad cat. I liked this game for the sort of card counting bit of it, and you really need to want to pay attention and do card counting to make this game work at all. You have to pay attention to who has played their high value cards, who has played their low value cards, who has played their dog cards, who is going to be going first, because they're very likely to not want to, not want to tip their hand if they're going first. If you've got that big negative card, you're not going to put it at the very beginning. you're going to want to wait till you're like the third or fourth player so that all the other players can have bid each other up, and you know that the card that is your color is going to be a big negative and you can get out right before that happens. So you have to pay attention to the turn order, who's winning this bid because they're going to go early in the next round. You need to pay attention to what is left, sort of taking into account that everybody is missing one of the set of cards. So maybe they haven't played their large positive card, but they don't have their large positive card. You have to sort of take that into account. So this is very much a focused auction game, but it's not terribly complicated. Like, do I want this or do I not want this? If I don't want this, do I think I can make everybody think I want this for another round so I can get more mice tokens when I pass?
Yeah.
And it's a really clever little game, but I'm not sure I'd bring it out a ton just because I don't necessarily gravitate towards auction games. If you don't know if you gravitate towards auction games, this would be a great one. Like, it always feels funny because the theme is silly and ridiculous, and you have these tiddlywink mice tokens that you're saying, oh, I'll bid 10 mice for that, and you're like, maybe I won't. It's fun and it's simple, and it's a good beginner auction game. It feels a lot like High Society, but without the punishment where in High Society, when you bid it, it's gone.
High Society is brutal.
High Society is brutal. This feels like a similar complexity auction game.
Okay.
Without the brutality of having to commit what you put out in front of you, whether you get it or not.
Gotcha.
So I liked it for an auction game, but it's not the gateway that I'd pick because I'm not a huge auction game person. I'm glad I played it because now I know a gateway auction game that I'd say.
Now you know.
For somebody who didn't want to get beat down by the game. If they don't care, then we're going to play High Society and it'll be fun.
All right. Well, that is Felicity, or Felix, the cat
I
in
played
the
Felix. You can now buy Felicity.
Good to know. All right. Well, we've reached the end of our recent plays, and that can only mean one thing. It's time for us to move on to our main feature. What? What's that?
Oh.
What? Oh, yes. It's time to review In the Hall of the Mountain King.
With everything going on in the world right now, it's really easy to get out of your normal routines, your normal media streams. It's just easy to get into a sort of stay in your house funk and not know about new stuff. I'm really glad we've had a chance to talk about 2 Gray Fox games in the last couple of episodes that aren't necessarily the ones you'd hear about all the time, but that we really enjoyed here.
Yeah.
Draw Your Own Conclusions and Zoned Out are both great titles from Gray Fox Games, and we hope that you get a chance to play them even if your normal game groups aren't meeting or you're not going to whatever convention you were planning on going to.
Yeah, Draw Your Own Conclusions, really great drawing game for higher player counts, so when you do get a chance to get a few people back together at your game group, awesome opportunity to have some fun drawing. And Zoned Out, 2 to 4 player city building with a lot of really cool pieces and a lot of really awesome mechanics that we're all about. You can pick them up both at grayfoxgames.com or through your local retailer.
Gray Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted.
Danielle, do the
In
thing.
the Hall of the Mountain King
Yes.
is a 2019 release from Burnt Island Games, which plays 2 to 5 players in 75 to 90 minutes. The designers are Jay Cormier and Graham Johns, and the artists are Josh Capel and Kwanchai Moria. This is a game of tile placement, resource management, and never having enough hammers.
You always need more hammers. It's very important. If you remember nothing else from this review, you need some more hammers. In the game. Not maybe in real life. I don't know what you're up to. Maybe
People
you're
are doing
some...
home improvement.
Please stop going to Lowe's unless you really need to fix your toilet. Just, yeah. Oh, is it my turn?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm really, really into the Pure Gin Suite right now. You know, I am a little bummed that I don't have a copy of this on vinyl, and I'm going to have to rectify that.
How about you talk about the game?
In the Hall of the Mountain King is kind of a tile-laying and mountain excavating game for 2 to 5 players, where each of you is the head of a troll tribe, and you're going to go excavate into the mountain that you've been kicked out of, and you're coming back to reclaim your holy grounds or something like that. Basically, you have a big board in front of you that is the mountain that you are returning to, and you are going to be excavating into this mountain by placing some polyomino tiles, starting at an entrance tile that you choose where to place in the beginning of the game, and then by collecting resources and then spending those resources to place these polyomino tiles to go into the mountain. And as you go into the mountain, you're going to do a few different things. You're going to be busting up boulders using those hammers we talked about to place tunnels where you want them. You're going to be getting resources from them for different building abilities that you can get on later. You're going to be unearthing workshops and statues that are going to be either give you advanced ways to do some fun conversions, or maybe statues that you'll want to move around on some carts to get a whole bunch of bonus points, and really just kind of, doing the best you can to reclaim this land you've got. In addition to the main central board, every player has their own board, which you're going to be tracking and storing your resources on. You kind of have one board that you start with that just kind of gives you the scoring conditions. It shows you, okay, if you build this particular kind of tunnel, you're going to get these points. It has a space for you to store your resources. And on the other side, it tells you the points that you get for different statues, where they end up in the mountain, and, if they're on pedestals or not. Above that board is where you're going to be doing a lot of your resource generation, because you're going to be building out cards that are your trolls in kind of a pyramid above that board. You're going to start the game by selecting out of a set of 6 starting cards. You're going to end up with 4 of them that are going to nestle into the bottom or the top side of your board. So they're going to create the bottom of your pyramid, which is 4 cards wide. The cards you choose are going to give you some starting resources, and you're going to slide them a little bit underneath the board to kind of reveal the other part of the card that will come into play in a little bit when I talk about how you get more trolls. So on your turn, you're basically going to start by looking at all your stuff, and you're going to decide to take one of the 2 main actions. You're going to either recruit a troll from the main troll smoot board into your particular troll smoot, which is, I guess, what it's called, your pyramid of trolls.
Oh, I just thought you made a weird noise.
Troll smoot. And then the other option you can do is building tunnels, digging tunnels into the giant center board. Digging tunnels, pretty simple. You spend resources, you attach a polyomino to existing tunnels that you already have, and you're going to score points that way. We'll talk about that stuff as we go through the review. The troll smoot is the really interesting part of it, because you have the option to take trolls of either level 1, 2, or 3 from a main tableau. And when you take that card, you're going to place it above, kind of in a pyramid shape, above 2 of the trolls existing in your pyramid. So obviously, right off the bat, you're going to be placing 1 troll above 2 in your bottom row. As you go further on, you're going to be building a pyramid up till it ends on the 4th tier, where that 1 troll is going to be capping off everything. What's interesting here is when you play that card, you get resources that are depicted on that troll card, plus resources that are on the 2 troll cards below it. As you get higher up into the pyramid, you're going to get everything down that pyramid. It's going to cascade all the way down. So when you place that last troll card, you're going to get resources from all of the trolls in your entire pyramid. Here's the catch, though. They only generate resources if the resource space is empty on that particular card, and that matters because when you generate resources from trolls, they go onto the cards, not into your main supply. You can still use them from the cards. That's totally fine. You're going to use them to build your tunnels, or to break out boulders, or to do magic spells that allow you to, a little special, like one-time use kind of stuff. But if you are not efficient with using the resources in your pyramid, you're not going to get as much the next time you place a card above them. You're not going to generate more cool stuff. It's a really interesting decision you're going to be making there about how and when to take cards out of the troll smoot rather than trying to build into your tunnels. Building tunnels is pretty simple. Like I said, you're going to spend some resources, however many you need for any particular length of tunnel. They're all the way from a 3 square up to a 5 square polyomino. You're going to be placing these into the main board. You can't touch anybody else's tunnels. Everything has to connect on a flat side as well to your existing network. And you're also going to try to navigate around some spots that are either the statues, which are little, plastic pieces that you want to place a tunnel on to unearth and then move around into special places to get points, or you want to place next to workshop spaces. And as you unearth these workshops, you get a special tile in there that at the beginning of your turn you can activate to do some resource conversion. The other fun thing about building out that center area is the mountain is built up into, it's got like 4 rings, basically, as you go from the outside of the square to the inside of the square. 5 rings? It's 4 or 5. 5 rings, says Danielle from across by waving her hand at me. But depending on where your statues end up in those different rings, they're going to score more points. So you might want to wait to put a statue somewhere before you get a few tunnels in so you can spend a few extra carts, which is one of your resources, to move that in a little bit further. Another thing that you're thinking about while you're building out your halls is that when you make specific shapes, like say if you make a bunch of tunnels near each other that give you a 2x4 kind of square of all tunnel, you can then choose to christen it a Great Hall and take one of these special tiles from the very nice Game Trays inserts and place it over that space, which will get you more points if it has a statue in a specific altar on that tile. They score some points for the most part, but they score the real points when you get a statue on them.
Oh, that Great Hall's all tunnel.
Oh, that's all tunnel. But it's also very important because, you can't place over a workshop. You can't place a Great Hall over a workshop, and also they're polyominoes, so you got to figure out the way to get stuff to fit together, yada, 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 so on and so forth. The game is going to go on until somebody places their top troll, and that's going to trigger the end game. You're going to finish the round and then play 2 more. You've done a lot of the scoring as you go on through the game, but there are a few things you can get scores for at the end. Obviously, your statues, where they end up, your Great Halls, where they end up, and whether or not they have a special statue on their altars. You'll get a little bit of points here and there for resource sets. If you have 3 of a resource, you get a point, and you feel very proud of yourself. You've also collected a few little tokens here and there when you build or when you unearth a statue or when you place a pedestal in a specific ring. We'll talk again about that as we get in. There's 3 different colors of pedestal. I don't really need to tell you that right now. Just there are pieces, and you will find them, and then you will score. Yes.
Points.
And then at the end of it, you will determine who is the best king in these mountain halls.
Of
and
the
that
trolls.
is the game of In the Hall of the Mountain King. Danielle, as we do in a full review, let's start off with art and components.
Okay.
Quanche Moria, check.
Yeah.
The game looks...
I would never have guessed that, by the way.
Really? Okay. I remember seeing the box cover of this. I'm just like, there he is. There it is. Holy moly.
That is true. Mm-hmm. However, once we opened the game, I never looked at the box cover because it's somewhat of a spacious game.
It is a big, big game.
It takes up the whole table.
Yeah.
So the box got moved away.
Oh.
And then the only place that Quanche's art really shines is on the spell card illustrations, which are cards that are put out and can be used a certain number of times, and then they are removed and changed out. So you do get to see a good number of them in a game.
And on the trolls, they have art.
They do have art, but I would not have guessed that was Quanche's art just from the trolls.
I saw the final board, and I'm just like, okay, I get this, because it felt very reminiscent of the way he dealt with terrain splitting in Bosk, which is another Quanche game.
Yeah,
He did the
this
board
was
there.
much more grid-based.
Yeah,
though.
yeah.
I looked at... Honestly, I do not like this board, which is weird. I've told
fine.
you this
Yeah,
before.
that's
You
fine.
knew this. Which is weird. It's gray and black and orange. And really, those are the 3 colors that describe Danielle in a color palette pretty much. But,
You don't want to see him on a board.
I look at it, and it didn't... I don't know. I looked at it, and it looked really drab
Oh, okay.
to me. Which, I mean, you're digging through rock, so obviously it's not going to be super bright and rainbow colorful or whatever. But I don't know. I just looked at it and I was like, that's fine, but it doesn't really draw me in. Now, I agree with you. The really arty art pieces, those spell cards and the cover of the box, they are really good. I love them. I mean, I always love Quanche's art, but I wouldn't have necessarily looking at the game, have looked at it and been like, oh, this is definitely Quanche Moria.
Okay. One thing that I really appreciate about this, the one side of the board is for 3 players. The other side is for 4 and 5 players. There is different art on the back. One of them is wintertime, and the other one is normal
I think it's
weather
autumn
time.
on the
Autumn
other
time.
side.
That's an unnecessary yet awesome little change to make.
You are correct.
I think that
cool.
is fantastic. Also, the obviously 4 and 5 player side of the board is a little bit bigger, and I just really like double use boards for that kind of stuff rather than having a shrunken board for lower player counts. Also, because the way that the piece is set up on a 4 and a 5 player game is different. That is one thing I will say up front about this game. It's going to take a minute for you to set up this game your first time because you've got to understand like the way you're putting the statues out, where everybody puts their start pieces. But one thing that kind of goes into components, this game comes with Game Trays inserts.
Yes.
Thank God, because this would be a huge bear to set up. if there wasn't that.
Yeah,
and
you
I
have piles
yeah.
of stuff all over the place.
And it's very easy to just take out the resource trays, plop them down. We have, obviously, a Kickstarter edition of the game because I kick-started this game because I saw it. I was like, yep. And the basic components, you still get the game trays inserts. The basic components are decent. They're still, your good wooden kind of pieces. We have obviously the weird fancy pieces of, the resources or quote unquote realistic resources, stuff like that. But you just have basic rock, basic stuff like that.
Yeah, for some reason, a lot of us had and we played this game in the before times when you could still play games with multiple people. So we have played this at higher player counts.
Yes.
And a large number of the people we played with had difficulty picking up I think it was the black resource.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird shape. And the hammers are flat.
Yeah,
so
the
deluxe hammers.
They are cool, but
yeah,
if you have dexterity issues, I guess that may be a thing.
We'll need to get a little shovel for everybody to pick up the pieces.
A little plunger.
But like I will say, Game Trays Insert made it easy to put it in and take out of the box. One thing I will say, store the game horizontally. Don't store it vertically because obviously some stuff will slide around because the inserts are like that.
It also made it easy to see what great halls were left because the great halls are only one of every particular size. They stand up in
I really love that.
They stand up in the insert. So if you're across the table, like I said, this does take up a good bit of the table. You could be a couple feet away. You can be like, oh, okay, the littlest one is still there. I can see it. You may not be able to see exactly what the size is, but I can see that the littlest one is still there. Or I can see that the really big one is still there. As opposed to if they were just laying flat, you'd have absolutely no way other than going over or having somebody pass them to you. It nicely stood up and you could see the different shapes and, oh, that one's a rectangle, not a square. That one's a square. That was very useful.
It's a really nice insert. Oh, and I will also say, I talked about this back when we talked about Atlantis Rising because I unboxed them on the same day. This is the other of the games that I was very excited about because they gave me a freaking guide where to put all the pieces. I love to have that because I usually punch a game and put it away before I play it, before I know what any of the pieces are. So if you give me a guide for where stuff goes, I'm going to feel really good about it. Looking to you, Eagle Griffin. I don't know where your stuff goes. I got to search BGG for it.
Yep.
On Mars was the other game that I punched that day.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, I give it a big thumbs up on the art and components. Rulebook, I read from the rulebook. I had a pretty good job understanding everything. Learning curve, how did that feel for you being taught by me, a person who tries to teach games okay?
I mean, my problem learning this game did not have anything to do with the teach of this game.
Okay.
My problem learning this game had to do with something which I'm sure we are going to talk about later, which is the fact that this game gives me immense AP.
Oh, okay.
So I learned the game well in a teach. It didn't necessarily make 100% sense when you started explaining it, but once we started doing the thing that you do, it clicked immediately. Okay, this is what was told to me. I now vaguely understand what this is. I do it once. I'm down with it.
And it does, on your player board, have a nice little reference guide about what each of the steps are. So as you understand the steps more, you can easily just look down and just be like, okay, doing this step, this step, this step. Reference cards for steps. Who would have thought that would be such a great idea?
Yeah.
Danielle thought it.
The other thing I will say is that you can absolutely hose yourself at the beginning of this game, the first time you play it, if you don't take resources that will allow you to mitigate some stuff.
Yeah.
Hammers and carts and magic, which are purple acrylic pieces that allow you to use the spell cards that I was talking about earlier, are really important. And if you threw those away for resources at the beginning of the game, because you think, oh, I have nothing, I need resources, you can actually get yourself in quite a bind because then you're going to have to wait to buy new trolls that have those resources, hopefully.
Yeah.
And you won't be getting them on your refill. You'll only be getting them on the placement. So I will say there is a learning curve for this game. I appreciate how clear the teach was once I started doing it. But once we started doing it, I had already made the decision that caused me some trouble the first time we played it. I had already set up my base level, and it's very important to pick stuff that works with what you intend to do.
So I guess moving into the discussion, I'm interested to know what were your thoughts about this game before you played it? Because I obviously backed this on Kickstarter. I saw it at PAX Unplugged. I had a kind of an idea what was going on. I'm like, yo, polyominoes, give me a resource pyramid. This is going to be cool. I'm going to collect resources and all this stuff. And I know that you probably didn't look much into this at all before I'm like, Danielle, the game is here that I want to play.
Yeah, I vaguely remember when you did this as a Kickstarter, I was so non-whelmed. I wasn't even underwhelmed. My whelm was in a different state.
There was no whelm.
I saw this on the Kickstarter, and like I said, the board didn't particularly call out to me.
Yeah.
I, frankly, was at a point, because this came out when there was a lot of Kickstarters going on. I was like, we don't need more.
Yeah, this was definitely
We don't need
dense
more Kickstarter.
zone.
And I just didn't give it two thoughts. I didn't realize you backed it till it showed up. I forgot that it had showed up once it got put on the stuff that we needed to play. And it was not until you brought it to a game session and you were like, I played this with Daniel Brooks. Now we play it together. I was like, oh, okay, I guess this is a thing that's happening. And then I played it, and I very much liked what I did.
Cool.
But it's not something that had its hooks in me from the get-go. No.
Cool. I obviously, I was excited about this. I am generally excitable. I think that is a good phrase to describe me as a human being. Generally excitable about new things and new games.
Sentence is too long.
Generally excitable. See if we'll have that as an option on Animal Crossing for my title. But anyway, yeah, like it's polyominoes. It's a resource tree. I'm going to like it. It's got cool art that I personally appreciate. I will say, as I got to play it, I definitely felt a similar thing of I was continually just being like, oh, crap, I don't have the resources I need, and it's going to take me a while to dig out of this hole. And I feel like that was the biggest stumbling block that I had over a bunch of games is that some games I had a hard time getting that first little push of momentum to get myself going. There was always a point in every game where I'm just like, sweet, I just put my 3rd level troll up. I'm getting a whole bunch of resources. Look at me. I can do this. I got this workshop. But sometimes getting to that point was more of a struggle than I expected it to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like even
in the games of this that I felt not equipped in the beginning, I didn't feel that way the whole game. I didn't feel like I was on my back foot the whole game. I just felt at the beginning that I had to make really, really smart choices and hope that, since it was a learning game for a bunch of us, hope that everybody else didn't make the smartest choices in that learning game, which is fine. I mean, like, if everybody's learning together, that's still an enjoyable game. And after I got through maybe my first 2 trolls that I was buying into my system, what is this? Smoot?
Troll Smoot.
Smoot. Into my system, I felt like I had a really good handle on what I could do and what I needed to be able to convert, what workshop was essential for me to get, and what workshop I could just let go to the other side of the board so there's no chance I'm going to be able to connect to it.
Right.
I felt that we were all on the same foot. And in later games, I didn't necessarily feel like I was so hosed from the beginning, because I knew, like, stuff needs to go together and you need those conversion resources.
It's interesting to me, like, as we're sitting here talking about that, getting the ball rolling, I think about what we talked about an hour ago about Lions of Lydia and how that, that ramp up is pretty quick and it feels really easy to get going. And I think about like the way we prefer to play Terraforming Mars, which is 0 resources, maybe some prelude cards, start at the barest of nothing. And then there's other games like that. Tapestry, for example, was one that we, at least I felt the way that like you had to really work to get that first few, resource generations to kind of get it going. And I really feel like that's the distinction between your light to medium light and your medium to slightly heavy kind of resource and engine building kind of game. Because this game definitely has an engine building with that troll smoot there.
Yeah, but it's like a medium weight game.
Yeah, but it's squarely in that middle medium kind of spot. It's not so grueling that you're spending 3.5 hours terraforming Mars if you really start with nothing. But it is really something you got to be aware of coming in, that you're going to have a few rounds or so that you've really got to put into growing that engine. Pushing
a rock up a hill?
Oh, I see what you did there. Don't make me play the Peer Gynt Suite again. It is still queued up on my phone.
That's fine.
Yes. I really enjoyed that once I got a feel for it and once I got a feel for the way that the kind of the mechanics would work together. And it really came down to being smart about my tunnel placement early on, because when you place the tunnels on the board, you are likely to get resources off of them. So like, I think in one of the first games that I played, I was really just like, sweet, I'm going to go right for the center. I'm going to make a big old great hall. I'm going to feel great about it. But all of the resources that you get are in those outer rings. So it encourages you to start, really build up those first few turns around the outside before you start going in for a big building.
Okay, I feel like this is a good moment of transition, though.
Yes.
I felt like I understood that resource generation and the placement and what I needed to get out of my trolls better. Mm-hmm. And that got easier to do. The cogs spun a little better. I never, in any of the plays of this game, did not hit a point where I was just staring at the board, and if I were a GIF, there would have been like math going around my head. Because you need to be so absolutely frugal with your resources, but also use them before you get your new troll. Wasting things is a huge waste here.
Yeah.
And because sometimes you get more points by putting a tunnel down closer to the center, but you'll get fewer points for putting a statue in that ring, just because the points you get for placing statues are randomly determined at the beginning of the game.
For placing pedestals.
Yes, sorry, for placing pedestals. And you place the pedestals on the tiles. Mm-hmm. So maybe I really want to make this particular tile go towards the center, but if I do that, I'm going to lose a whole bunch of points on putting my statue there, or I don't want to place a statue pedestal quite yet because I don't have the right carts for it. And if you've got carts that are dedicated to a specific color and you're going to get a statue that's of the wrong color to get a whole bunch of points, it very much does come down to a math equation as you get towards the end of this game. And I don't normally get hit super hard by that stuff. I know you will moderately disagree with me, but I think on a sliding scale, I don't get AP as hard as some people do. Mm-hmm. This game just grinds me to a halt in the math department.
And that's really interesting to me because like you know, whatever you say about it, like you really don't have a lot of AP. But it's every now and then we'll have one of these games that will kind of hit you hard. I'm kind of always a slow plotting kind of player. I think that's kind of been the comment about me.
I mean, this is why I beat you at games the first time we played them, and you beat me at games the fourth through whatever time we played them.
I guess. But I don't know what it was about this, but I always felt like I had a clear path forward, even if it was just like make one troll move to get one resource. And that's just, it's interesting that this one is what brought that out for you.
Yeah, because it's very difficult to undo anything that you do, and because everything moves something else. Mm-hmm. Where I put this determines what I have left, determines when I'm going to need to take a troll, determines what statues I have, what troll I take determines what color pedestal I have, determines how many points I get if I put a statue on that pedestal.
Yeah.
Do I want to be working towards getting a great hall, or do I want to be working towards moving towards the middle or towards a workshop? Mm-hmm. Or what do I want to do? There's so many little bits, and twisting it just a little bit realigns everything. And I very much found myself in a spot where that math was repeatedly being redone and redone and redone. Oh, I don't have the hammer to do this because that would mean I need 2 hammers and I only have 1 hammer, and that means I can't do any of this. I enjoyed it. I didn't hate it, but I know it can't have been fun to sit there and watch me like try to chew the board with my head.
I guess a question also would be, how did that feel as you played more games of this? Did you get more of a feel for it later on?
No, it didn't get any better.
That's interesting.
Because it's not a matter of, do I understand how they work together? I understand how they work together. I understand what the different parts are and how I can get points. It's that every point is a plus here and a minus there. And every tile that you move is adding points somewhere, but also possibly subtracting points somewhere. Not from your score, just from like what you will earn on that round. So, I mean, I guess I got a little bit quicker at adding up the small numbers, but I'm already pretty quick at adding up small numbers.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't get any quicker at deciding what was the right option, because you still have to add up all of the options to find out what the best one is.
Yeah. Simple Jake over here is just happy to put squares next to squares. One thing I do want to talk about is, how did you feel this game was different at different player counts? Because we played at 2, 4, and 5, I think. I don't know if we ever played a 3-player game, but I know you and I played 2 players. I played 2 with Danielle, and we've played 4, and I have played a 5-player game as well.
We played 5 when Nathan came in.
Yeah. So, like, did it feel different to you? Did you ever feel crowded in this?
No.
Yeah.
At a higher player count, there was slightly more interaction. Like, I connected to a workshop that somebody else had placed down.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't... Like, you were never creating these sprawling networks.
Yeah.
You are creating a plodding step forward of small tunnels. Mm-hmm. So I never felt like I couldn't do what I wanted because there were other people's tunnels in my way. You don't generate resources quickly enough to immediately jump out and get in somebody else's way. Mm-hmm. Now, that may also be because almost every game we played, or possibly every game, we all sort of started in our own closest area instead of I guess we could have started all up in each other's business on one side of the board and left it all alone there.
On like a 2-player game, it would be pretty easy. But like on a 5-player game...
But it's also stupid.
Yeah.
Like, because you want to be able to get the resources when you place stuff down. And if there's somebody else competing for the same resources on the board, you're not going to get as much, and you're going to have an even harder time pushing that boulder of an engine up the hill the first time. Like, you do yourself a service by not being up in other people's business.
Yeah. I expected there to be a lot more interaction, a lot more like networks bumping up against each other in this game. I'm glad that there wasn't, because I don't think I would have enjoyed the parts that I wanted to play with if I had to then also calculate, can this person get in my way every single turn? That would have been really, really frustrating. Like, the only places that I had like real, oh crap, they did the thing I wanted to do, was using the spell cards, which is, we never really talked about this. There's 3, use a token to get a special benefit kind of cards, like do extra scoring such and such way. And sometimes like somebody would get to one of those before me, or somebody would
like I said in the art, they cycle out after a certain number of uses.
Or somebody would get to like a troll card that I wanted, or maybe one of the great halls. Like, you're competing on that level and not so much on competing for the actual space on the board. And I kind of like that, because rather than somebody's in my way, now I got to deal with this nonsense. It's like, oh, well, that option's gone. I got to come up with a different way to get to my
do another set of math.
Yeah, do a different set of math rather than you're blocked and you can't do anything.
Yeah, no. I agree with you. It never felt like there was somebody that was just taking the thing on the board that I wanted, but it was in other places. It was the trolls or the spell cards, or I never really needed a great hall that wasn't there, but that may just be the way that I was planning my stuff out. And we didn't talk about this in components, but I want to bring it up before we finish.
Okay.
How did you feel about the fact that you could only build certain polyominoes, and they aren't necessarily the shapes you'd expect?
Yeah, like there's no long L piece. Or no long eye piece or something. That is a little odd. I understand it's, probably just a component limiting kind of thing.
Well, I always felt like it was a reason, because you had to work pretty hard to get the shapes that a great hall could sit in. And based on where the holes for pedestals were, it lined up in a really interesting way with the way rock formations were. You'd need to place over rock formations in order to get things in really useful positions. So I don't know. I got the feeling that it was a very intentional, like, you don't get the shape that you want. You get the shape that we're going to give you.
Okay.
And the largest pieces didn't have any pedestal holes in them.
Yeah.
So if you were going to make a lot of leeway on your tunnels, you weren't going to be able to get statue points. So I don't know. I thought that was interesting. And tile pieces are also limited.
Yes, that was really, really interesting as well, because we very frequently, everybody took all of the 4-block Ls.
Yeah, the little L pieces.
Those go immediately because they're the easiest to work with. But yeah, no, it's a very good point. And I am glad that they were limited in that way, because, again, it makes you think, okay, how am I going to adapt to that piece being gone? Which is kind of thing that I want to do in a game like this. I want to have to adapt rather than just be blocked off. How do you feel about like replayability on this? I feel like this is the kind of game that I could continue to bring out and I would get some mileage out of, just because of the different way my troll cards would come out, the magic cards would come out. But I could see it needing objectives in some way to make it, live forever, quote unquote. So I don't know, like, I'm sure you would just roll your eyes at the thought of another set of math to deal with.
Yeah, I don't want anything else in this game. I absolutely don't want an expansion to this. But
well, let me tell you about the Cursed Mountain Box.
I know, we already have an expansion that we haven't played with. I also could see, after like several games of this in a row, it getting not samey, but strategy developing that makes it feel similar. You're not doing the exact same thing, but you're setting up for the same types of things. at the same time, we don't play the same games that many times after we talk about them.
Yeah. Sad
If
truth.
this were a game that you played 3 times a year, I don't think I'd get tired of it. And 3 is, for a lot of people, 3 is a decent number of plays for a game. For a lot of people, it's not. But if you played this a couple of times a year, I don't think you'd get super tired of it.
Yeah.
If you played this every week, I think it would become same or similar pretty quickly.
I feel like I would like to play this game a few times a year.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely down with that. But I think that the variability in this game is going to come from different player counts more than anything else. Because I feel like it will feel like stuff will cycle out differently at 3 players than it will at 5. And considering that none of the player counts felt super crowded or super super interactive-y, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
in
that's
the
why
main
I don't super feel like the player count gives that much difference.
It'll change the way that the tiles go out and the way that the cards go out, the trolls go out, and the all that kind of stuff. I feel like that's where the interesting part is to me.
You can't count on a bunch of money getting placed up on the troll cards, because when you take a troll from the 2nd or 3rd level, you have to place a coin on every troll below it. Mm-hmm. So in a higher player count game, you can get a kind of decent number of coins stacked up on some of those lower level trolls. Mm-hmm. Whereas in a lower player count game, A, you don't have the coins for that, and B, you're not going to get as much input, so you can't rely on that strategy.
Yeah. So there is a little expansion box. The Cursed Mountain is team play and also solo play. So it's not like expansion with new stuff. It's really just, different player count kind of stuff. I am interested to see what team play would be like in this game. I don't know if I'm rushing out to do it, but I am also kind of want to play the solo stuff because, again, I like the pieces of this game. I like the troll building and I like the tunnel building. I think those are good parts. So I feel like I'm really interested to see what this one brings to solo. All right. Well, Danielle, you want to roll into final thoughts?
Why are they not dwarves? Why are they trolls? Fair enough. I thought they were dwarves the whole freaking game. But this is an interesting game. I definitely liked it more than I anticipated, which is not saying a ton because I didn't pay attention to it before we got it, but I did enjoy it when I got into it. It is certainly the kind of game that I am going to need to sit there and think about every time I play it, but I do like that sometimes. There are some games where I want to make sure that I'm doing the right move. I want to be doing that math 15 times every turn. Terraforming Mars is my favorite game. So, I can't say that I don't like games where I'm not checking to see how one thing impacts another thing. It is definitely that. Know that about it before you get involved in it. It is not a game where you're just going to casually have a chat and maybe play a game. You're going to be sitting there doing all the math. But I like that about it. It's fun. It's got a lot of interesting things. It's got points that come from enough spots that it does give you all those things to think about. Like, if you're playing a game, it's nice to have a bunch of stuff that you can tweak and fiddle with sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I like that about this game. I agree with you. It's a couple of times a year game, 2-3 times a year, and I'm good. I don't need to play it every week, but I also don't want to get rid of it. I like having it in our collection.
Cool. I feel like In the Hall of the Mountain King is a good centerpiece of your game night on a weekday. This is, like you said, it's a game you bring out a few times a year. Maybe you play 1 or 2, lighter games before it. Maybe you have a cool down game afterwards, but you're going to get the brain meat in it that you want. It's not the best phrasing. You know what I mean, though. You're gonna get the tingly decisions in your brain you want during this game. But I do agree, if you play this game too often, you're probably going to just do the same thing again and again. So having it as a treat every now and then is going to be a good spot for this game. I feel like you get some really interesting decisions with the way that you're building out your tunnels and managing that resource generation in the beginning half of the game that really rolls into a very satisfying cascade later on as you play those 3rd and 4th level trolls that are just getting you tons of stuff and allowing you to do a whole bunch of stuff on your next turn. Additionally, with that, it doesn't outstay its welcome in that regard, because once you've got to that point where your resource pyramid is maxed out, that's the end of the game. So it can't just sit there and one player continues to re-trigger that again and again. Once they're done, that's the max that they're going to get. So it's up to you to build the right foundation for your pyramid so that you can get the most out of it and you become the king of your mountain hall. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Pure Gin Sweet. Anyway, In the Hall of the Mountain King is available now. You can go check it out on the internet, and we have some beers to pair with it that you will hear about after this brief break.
For more information on the beers we chose to pair with today's game on tap, check out the show notes section at our website, draftmechanic.net.
All right, it is time to put In the Hall of the Mountain King on tap. It is a 2019 release from Burnt Island Games, 2 to 5 players, 75 to 90 minutes. This game is designed by Jay Cormier, Graham Johns, and art by Josh Capel and Quanche Moria. The game of tile placement, resource management, and never having enough hammers. Danielle, will you start us off?
First, from Miskatonic Brewing Company in Darien, Illinois, we have Mountain King, which is a New England IPA that comes in at 7.1% ABV and 40 IBU. It's a Norwegian hazy IPA that is passion fruit, mango, and juicy fruit full, and it has fluffy oats with a soft, bitter finish.
Soft.
It is available in 12-ounce cans.
Second on the list, from Boojum Brewing Company in Waynesville, North Carolina, it is King of the Mountain Double IPA. It's 8% ABV, 110 IBUs. You will get walloped by the bitterness of this beer. It is their flagship Double IPA, available in 12-ounce cans. And I would like to say Boojum one more time. Boojum. That's a good brewery name. Oh, I'm sorry?
Waynesville.
Boojum and Waynesville. They have good stuff. They had a blueberry chocolate porter or something we had once, or blueberry coffee porter.
Yeah.
Boojum's good. Cool.
From Turning Wheels Craft Brewery in Cebu City, Philippines, we have Mountain King, which is an American IPA that comes in at 7% ABV and 65 IBU. There wasn't a lot of information about this, but Turning Wheels and a lot of other publications have called them the first craft brewer in Cebu.
Cool.
So I wanted to sort of draw attention to them. It seemed from their Facebook page, which functions as their website, that there is a liquor ban in the Philippines at the moment.
Ooh.
So, because they don't want people congregating.
Yeah.
So, that sort of has slowed the information that I'm getting about this. They don't have a real website. They have a Facebook, as far as I can tell. And it is not super well developed as far as information goes. But, I mean, they are updating it. They've updated the Facebook with at least, like, information in the last month. So, if you are, for some reason, listening to us in Cebu, in the Philippines, you have this option at some point. I really hope for you.
Yeah.
And I always like to highlight breweries that aren't necessarily like, oh, this one's in Chicago and this one's in Western North Carolina.
Well, this one's in Dallas, Texas. It's Pegasus City Brewery, and they have a beer called the Great Hall Heffe. It is a Hefeweizen, 5.4% ABV and 22 IBU. This is a German-style Hefeweizen with a slightly sweet finish, a subtle citrus, and emphasis on banana over cloves. More banana-y, less clove-y. Bananas.
And finally, from Hales Ales Brewery and Taproom in Seattle, Washington, we have Troll Porter. This is an American porter that's 6.6% ABV and 31 IBU. It's a porter with mocha and chocolate overtone.
Thereby proving that everything does not have to be an IPA on our lists, no matter the fact that IPAs are infinite and named a bunch.
There's a Heffa on here, too.
There is a Hefeweizen. Danielle, you always do a very good job at these things.
I sometimes do a very good job at these
And
things.
if you would like to know more information about these or other beers we have paired stuff to in the past, you can go to draftmechanic.net, click Show Notes, and that'll go there. You can also go to boardgames.beer, which I feel contractually obligated to mention at this point of the episode. Boardgames.beer, an actual real human website that I use money to buy. Danielle, would you like to tell us about a hop?
Sure. Let's do a hop primer on Mosaic.
Ooh, that is classic.
Yeah, I mean, not really as classic as you'd think.
Okay.
It actually hit the brewing scene in 2012, so
Really?
not super classic.
I'm going to learn some things. I'm going to sit my chair back. Hang on. Yep.
Well, you could have learned some things while drinking a 100% Mosaic hop, but we accidentally drank it yesterday.
I'm sorry.
It's-
I'm not sorry. It was delicious.
It's fine. We'll talk about it at the end.
Yeah.
Mosaic is a patented variety invented by Jason Peralt, who, through his hop breeding company Select Botanicals and Hop Breeding Company, HBC, has also created Citra and Simcoe hops.
Oh, dang.
So this dude is, one might say, prolific in modern
The
hop
Hopmeister.
creation. He was searching for a higher yielding Simcoe-like variety, and that's what led him to create Mosaic. The breeding program started in 2001 when they crossed a female Simcoe and a nugget-derived male. Nugget is a type of hops as well. And they had a lineage, and that nugget-derived male had some lineage in Tomahawk, Brewer's Gold, and early green, which are all hop varieties, and an additional unknown varietal. Like I said, it was named and fully released to the craft brewing scene in 2012. The name Mosaic was given to the variety because of the complex and broad aromas it has. This is a really complex profile. It has a clean bittering to the back, which makes it really remarkable for single hop ales. Like I was saying, we could have had a single hop beer because this beer has so many different aspects to it. More so than a lot of the other hops we've talked about, people are willing to make it the only hop in a beer. It has notes that are mostly blueberry or berry medley aromas. It also has other descriptors including mango, stone fruit, a rosy or floral aroma, some bubblegum, a little bit of tropical and citrus, some grassiness, some pininess, some earthiness, and herbal spice. So it's really got all the points that you can get from different types of hops, which is why it is so complex and why they called it Mosaic. It had all those little pieces in there. Mm-hmm. Mosaic hops cover all three corners of hop usage pretty well. In fact, they have become more obvious when you see, like I said, this is the amount of single hop IPAs being churned out from this variety. You could use it for the aroma and flavor, and you can also get a clean bittering hop, or you can use a clean bittering hop like Magnum or Galena with it as well to complement it if you don't want to use it by itself. Mm-hmm. Because of its fruitiness, it plays really well with other fruity and citrusy hops, which is unsurprising considering the guy who made Citra made this. It has a wonderful berry fruitfulness, and it is complemented by the contrasting earthy piney notes that it also has in it. So it sort of brings its own +1 over there.
So many notes.
For those of you who like the maths a little bit, it is a 10.5 to 14% alpha acid. And if you're looking for beers, like I said, there are a bunch of single hops. Single hop beers that are Mosaic only include Homestyle from Bearded Iris, which is the one that we had. Also Mosaic Promise from Founders Brewing, and Yellow Rose from Lone Pint Brewery. Anything from other half with the words Mosaic or Mosaic Dream is also 100% Mosaic hops. They have Mosaic Daydream, Mosaic Dream, Double Mosaic Dream, Double Mosaic Daydream, Double Dry Hopped, Double Mosaic Dream. These are all Mosaic beers that other half has made. Mm-hmm. But don't ask the guy from other half why he likes to make double IPAs.
Does like to make double IPAs. Just a thing, you know.
So these are all good options. You should not have a difficult time finding a Mosaic beer if you want to try something that is only Mosaic. I'm sure there's a brewery by you that is making one with Mosaic hops.
They're right over there. Look around the corner. It's the brewery making a beer with Mosaic hops.
But I mean, if you had that Homestyle yesterday and I didn't tell you that it was only one hop, would you have guessed that that was only one hop?
No. I mean, it's got a ton of different flavor in it. There's a lot of different things that come out of that beer.
Cool.
Mainly beer comes out of that beer.
Well, now we've learned a little bit about Mosaic hops.
Cool. Well, Danielle, I'm sure you'll be one to put some links in the show notes for some information.
Always
you can go
do.
check that at draftmechanic.net, show notes, or boardgames.beer, an actual human website I'm contractually obligated to speak about. I'm just going to leave that static in there to make it even weirder.
Okay.
All right. Well, we're coming to the end of this episode, but there's one more thing to do, and it's to go to the final round. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. No, we have actual music for that, don't we?
Mm-hmm. Want a second opinion on some of the games we talked about on this episode? Check out some other great content creators at punchboardmedia.com.
Yes, the final round announced a while back. It was, in fact, this. Do any of your games have house rules? How did they come up? Were they intentional to fix a game, or just a mistake that stuck around? Or are you anti-house rules? We'll get to that in a little bit. But first up, BJ from Board Game Gumbo says Carcassonne house rule. I'm sorry, I don't have the effects button right. I'm not touching that thing. It's already messed up once today. BJ says, we use the standard variant of 3 tiles in your hand. It makes it more gamery, in my opinion. Before we get into the response, Danielle, how do you feel about that?
We don't generally do that with Carcassonne, but we do play with the house rule that you draw your tile at the end of your turn unless you're playing with the builder.
I do really like that a lot.
I feel like at this point, if we started instituting a hand of tiles, we'd get more in our own way. We play too much Carcassonne that way, but yeah, we always draw at the end of the turn instead of the beginning.
So don't give me options about how to grow this field. Speaking of Carcassonne, Danny Dougherty actually responded to BJ's thing, and I believe those are the words that you have.
I appreciate the gaminess argument, but like that the standard rules put the effort on the player to use what they've got rather than giving them options to hoard rare pieces. I'm also partial to the one-tile version, meaning that on the tablet, you have perfect information for both players, letting me and my partner play on the couch without having to tilt the tablet away from each other. Makes sense.
Carcassonne information. Information zone.
Yeah, I mean, with one tile, you know exactly what is on the board and what the other player has.
Paul Imboden has a house rule that I have heard before. He says, we flat out refuse to play with betting in Mysterium. It's a co-op. You shouldn't be rooting for your team's failure. That is kind of an interesting comment because in Mysterium, you're kind of placing those bet tokens on whether you think they're right or they're wrong. And if you're playing the game truly cooperatively, hopefully you're helping them pick the right thing. And maybe you're just putting those tokens down to get extra points. And it's like, you just get points for being right about them being wrong. I can understand somebody wanted to cut that out. I think that was added into the English version of the game, too.
Yeah, I think so as well.
Yeah.
I don't know, I like those, but I appreciate why you wouldn't like them.
Okay.
D. Shannon Berry says, not going to be relatable to many here, but I had a chance to play a preview copy of Grinto. It's relatable to us, so I'd like
Yes.
to hear what he has to say. Due to the early draft of the rules, we accidentally played that the goal cards cycled out every season, and only key element cards stayed for the whole game. I actually ended up preferring the game that way. It gave the game more tactical space, evened out runaway leaders, and felt that I felt that the player order was a little more balanced. I plan to play with this house rule when the Kickstarter fulfills.
Interesting. Peter says, when the rules say to place the board in the center of the table, we settle for the middle instead of measuring the exact center. That's important. That's really important because, like, realistically downstairs, we've got a big table, and I don't want to put it in the center of the table because, like, we have got some games on that side of the table. I got to move them. We can just play over here, but, you know, kind of between us. I'm okay with that being a good house rule.
Yes. BJ chimed back in. He says, also, when we play Monopoly, we have a house rule to replace the board, money, and all the pieces with the stockpile board and the pieces and use those rules instead. So it seems that we've gone a little bit off the rails here.
Well, thankfully, Patrick Hillier is here to bring us all back to order. Banging the hammer, order, order. As a resident rules lawyer, I hereby declare house rules out of order and demand this conversation be stricken from the record. Okay, we don't play for points and illustrations, but don't you dare put that on the air.
You put it on the air.
I actually threatened Patrick that I was going to say it in the very beginning of the episode, before the bump even happened, or before the Punchboard Media tag even happened. But I fell through on that promise, so here we are. I guess I have to end the episode. But before I do that, I will say I already have a final round topic for next episode.
Oh, snap.
Patrick gave it to me.
Had 3 weeks and you got the final round episode
To be
from somebody
fair,
else?
he did give it to me weeks ago, and I was just going to put this in the next episode. And it's even more appropriate now as we're kind of thinking wistfully as to what it would be like to be back at board game conventions. Like, who knows if we're going to make it to Geekway or Gen Con or Origins or PAX Unplugged. Well, hopefully PAX Unplugged at this point. But the question that Patrick had is relevant to conventions and convention experiences, so we can all talk about this. So, special guest question from Patrick Hillier. When you are at an event or con with your partner, do you always play games with them? Let's all answer this question together so we can pretend we are all at conventions with all of our friends. Someday. We'll be back at conventions someday.
I assume this question doesn't mean only with them.
Yeah, but like, do you prefer to play just with your partner, or do you prefer to play with some other people as well? Or are you just kind of like, all right, I'll see you in 5 hours. Go play Terraforming Mars and or 18XX games. I will see you at the convention food line.
Yeah.
Oh, I've done better. I think that means it's time to end this episode. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. We really, really appreciate you using your download minutes and spending approximately 2 hours of your time with us. I know it's been a little shaky here on the release schedule because of, obviously, life is a thing. But we are coming back and we're going to find a way to play some 2-player games and stuff over the next few weeks.
That's our problem, not yours.
Yeah, but would love to talk to you all on social media. You can find us on the internet at draftmechanic.net or at draftmechanic on the social medias of your choice. You can come hang out in our Slack channel. It's draftmechanic.net/Slack if you want to join in there. Talk about beers, share pictures of local breweries that are doing drive-thrus and what 2-player games or 3-player games, if you have more than 2 people in your family, are playing. Yeah, I've rambled. Danielle, take over.
Okay, we've also got a Board Game Geek Guild. Did you say we have a Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook?
I did say those things.
Okay, we've got a Board Game Geek Guild. It's guild number 2470. If you happen to be in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, we don't have game nights for the foreseeable future until we're all allowed to leave reasonably. And that is wise. Wash your hands instead.
Yes. Wash your hands, order delivery, support your local craft brewery and your local restaurants. And as always, support your game publishers. Particularly, Draft Mechanic is sponsored by Gray Fox Games. You can always visit grayfoxgames.com for the latest. Gray Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted. I just always leave a little bit of extra space for that last word. Quality games, cleverly crafted. Y'all think I forgot it, but I didn't forget anything at all. I never forget anything at the end of the episode.
Well, then you must remember that it is time for me to remind our listeners to please game responsibly.
And wash your hands.
And wash your hands and stay away from people you don't live with. And tell them that we'll see them back here in 2 weeks, we promise this time, for another round.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Wash your hands. Draft Mechanic episode 119 is recorded on Monday, April 6th, 2020 in front of a very sleepy studio cat.
Beauty is in your eyes, you are the beholder. You render me stricken. Do not go gently into that gutter line.
Hey, this is Patrick
And this is Eric.
from
Patrick and Eric in the morning. Join us every now and again for about a half an hour as we freeform chat about whatever's on our minds and how it all relates back to our favorite hobby, board gaming.
Patrick and Eric in the morning can be found on the What Did You Play This Week podcast feed and on the Punchboard Media site.
Happy listening.
where we all
Bring something
to the table.
pull up a chair
At punchboardmedia.com.